When Linda Harper opened the envelope, she read the first line twice. Then she slowly lowered herself onto a diner stool, looked at the quiet man from table 7, and whispered, "What did you do?" He simply folded his hands on the counter. "Something I should have done a long time ago. If you believe one act of kindness can come back when someone needs it most, stay with me until the end." For 27 years, Linda Harper had opened the doors of the Maple Street Diner before sunrise. At 61, she no longer needed an alarm clock. Her body simply knew, 4:45 in the morning, coffee first, griddle second, lights third. Then she would unlock the front door, just before the sky began turning gray. The diner sat on the corner of a quiet American town, where people still recognized one another at the grocery store. It wasn't fashionable, the booths were old. One ceiling tile had a faint stain that Linda had been promising herself she would replace for almost 3 years. The coffee mugs didn't match, and the menu had barely changed since her husband Frank had helped her open the place. But people loved it. Construction workers came before their shifts. Retired couples shared pancakes on Sunday mornings. Teachers stopped in for coffee. Doctorants brought children, who eventually grew up, and returned with children of their own. For Linda, the diner had never felt like a business. It felt like an extension of her kitchen, and for many years, that had been enough. Then Frank died. Linda kept opening the diner because she didn't know what else to do. Every corner reminded her of him. The old register had been his choice, the blue trim outside had been his idea. Even the crooked shelf behind the counter had been installed by Frank one Sunday afternoon. While Linda complained that he wasn't using a level. After losing him, closing the diner felt like losing him a second time, so she stayed. But the numbers became harder to ignore, repairs grew more expensive. Food costs rose, a refrigerator failed, then part of the roof needed work. Linda used her savings, then more savings. Then she borrowed against the building. She told almost no one. To the customers, she was still Linda. Coffee, the usual, want pie with that. But after everyone left, she sometimes sat alone at the counter, with bills spread in front of her. She would move numbers from one column to another, as though rearranging them might somehow create money. It never did by early autumn. Linda knew the truth. She was running out of time. The diner was still loved. It just wasn't earning enough to carry the debt that had built around it. One Tuesday afternoon, after the lunch crowd disappeared, Linda taped a small piece of paper beside the register. It read, "Diner for sale, serious inquiries only." She stared at the sign for several seconds. Then she walked into the kitchen, and cried where no customer could see her. The first person to notice the sign was Henry Wallace. Henry was 74, and had occupied table 7 almost every weekday for the past 9 years. He arrived at 6:20 in the morning, never 6:15, never 6:30, 6:20. Black coffee, 1 egg toast, sometimes oatmeal. When Linda convinced him he needed something more substantial, Henry had a quiet way about him. He wore simple jackets, drove an older sedan, and carried the same brown leather wallet he had owned for years. Most people knew very little about him. They knew his wife had died several years earlier. They knew he lived alone. They knew he liked crossword puzzles, and they knew that if someone else was sitting at table 7, Henry would quietly choose another table without complaining. Linda had never thought of him as wealthy. She had never really thought about his money at all. He was simply Henry, one of her regulars. But what Linda didn't fully understand was what the diner had meant to him. Years earlier, shortly after Henry lost his wife, he had stopped eating proper meals, not because he couldn't afford them. He simply didn't care enough to cook for himself. One rainy morning, he wandered into Linda's diner. He ordered coffee, nothing else. Linda brought him toast anyway. Henry looked at the plate. "I didn't order that." Linda nodded. "I know, then why is it here?" She gave him a small smile. "Because coffee isn't breakfast." Henry almost smiled. The next morning, he returned, then again. And again eventually. Linda learned his name. She never interrogated him about his grief. She never tried to give him advice. She simply remembered his coffee. She noticed when he seemed quieter than usual. And on the first anniversary of his wife's death, Henry came into the diner, and sat at table 7 for nearly 2 hours. Linda never charged him for breakfast that morning. When Henry protested, she simply said, "Some mornings shouldn't come with a bill." He never forgot those words. Linda did. To her, it had been a small kindness. To Henry, it had been one of the moments that helped him begin participating in life again. Years later, when Henry saw the for sale sign beside the register, he didn't say anything immediately. He ate half his breakfast, then he called Linda over. "You retiring?" Linda tried to smile. "Something like that." Henry looked at her. He had been coming there long enough to know when she was pretending. "Linda." She looked away. "It doesn't matter, it matters if you're selling this place." Linda poured coffee into his cup, even though it was already nearly full. Finally, she admitted the truth. "The bank balance is more than I can manage." Henry waited. Linda sighed. "The diner makes enough to stay open, it doesn't make enough to stay open, and carry everything I've borrowed trying to keep it alive." Henry looked at her carefully. "How long?" Linda understood exactly what he meant. "Maybe a month, 6 weeks if I'm lucky." Henry nodded slowly, then he finished his breakfast, he left his usual tip, he put on his jacket, and before walking out, he said something Linda didn't understand. "Don't sign anything this week." Linda almost laughed. "Henry, I don't think 1 week is going to change much." "Maybe not." He opened the door, "but give me one anyway." 2 days later, Henry returned. It's time. He wasn't alone, a local attorney accompanied him. Linda immediately became nervous. "Henry? What is this?" A conversation. Henry then explained something almost nobody in town knew about him. Before retirement, he had spent decades helping manage a family-owned manufacturing business with his older brother. The company had eventually been sold. Henry lived simply. Because he preferred living simply. His wife had been the same way. After she died, most of the money remained invested. He had no children, no expensive hobbies, no interest in buying a larger house. And during all those years, while Henry quietly ate breakfast at table 7, his finances had continued to grow. No one in the diner knew. Linda stared at him. "I don't understand what this has to do with me." Henry placed a folder on the counter. "I asked your bank whether there was a legal way for someone to satisfy the remaining building loan provided you agreed." Linda froze, then immediately shook her head. "No." Henry hadn't even told her the amount yet. "No, Henry, listen first, I can't take your money." "Then don't think of it as money." Linda stared at him. "What am I supposed to think of it as?" Henry slowly looked around the diner, at the counter, at the coffee machine, at table 7, then back at Linda. "Think of it as breakfast." Linda almost became angry. "Breakfast? For 9 years, I walked through that door. Somebody noticed whether I showed up." His voice softened. "When my wife died, most people were kind for a few weeks, then their lives continued. That's normal." He paused. "But this place continued too." Linda's eyes began to fill with tears. Henry pointed toward table 7. "You gave me somewhere to be every morning, when I didn't have anywhere I wanted to be. Henry, you fed me when I wasn't taking care of myself. You remembered difficult dates without making me talk about them. You made me feel like someone would notice. If that chair was empty." Linda slowly sat down. Henry pushed the folder toward her. The lawyer explained the arrangement carefully. Nothing would happen without Linda's approval. Henry was offering to pay the remaining debt, secured against the diner building, directly through the proper financial channels. No ownership percentage, no rent, no secret contract giving him control of the business. He simply wanted Linda to own the building, free of that particular debt. Linda looked at the number, then closed the folder. "I can't accept this." Henry nodded. "I thought you'd say that. It's too much, maybe. I could never repay you." Henry smiled. "I wasn't asking you to." Linda wiped her eyes. "Why would anyone do this?" Henry glanced toward his table. "Because sometimes, the bill arrives years later." Linda didn't understand. Then Henry repeated the words she had once said to him. "Some mornings shouldn't come with a bill." Linda covered her mouth. And suddenly, she remembered. Not the exact morning, not immediately, but she remembered Henry, rain on the windows, the empty look on his face, the untouched coffee, toast she had placed in front of him. Something that had meant almost nothing to her, had apparently meant everything to him. "You remember that?" Henry nodded. "I remember every word." For nearly an hour, Linda refused. Henry didn't pressure her, he simply talked. Eventually, they reached an agreement Linda could live with. She would accept his gift toward the building debt, but Henry had to accept something too. Free breakfast for life. Henry smiled. "That's financially irresponsible." Linda laughed through her tears. "So is paying off a diner." And for the first time in months, the sound of her laughter filled the room. The change wasn't dramatic overnight. Linda still had bills, the diner still had expenses, the roof still needed maintenance, and the old refrigerator did not suddenly become young again. But removing the building debt changed what the diner needed to earn every month. For the first time in years, Linda could breathe. She took down the for sale sign. A customer asked where it went. Linda simply said, "We're staying." By noon, half the town seemed to know. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. People who had heard the diner was struggling began showing up more often. A local carpenter repaired 2 damaged cabinet doors and charged Linda only for materials. A retired painter refreshed the blue trim outside. A group of former high school students, who'd spent countless afternoons sitting in Linda's booths, organized a Saturday breakfast fundraiser for future repairs. Linda protested almost all of it. Nobody listened. And Henry? He kept arriving at 6:20, black coffee, 1 egg toast. Table 7. Linda kept trying to give him increasingly large breakfasts for free. Henry kept insisting that accepting 12 pancakes wasn't part of their agreement. Then one morning, Linda placed his plate in front of him. Henry looked up, and noticed something on the wall beside his booth, a small brass plaque. He adjusted his glasses. "What is that?" Linda smiled. The plaque read, "Table 7, always reserved for a friend." Henry stared at it for a long moment, then quietly said, "You didn't need to do that." Linda smiled. "I know." Henry looked at Linda. Linda looked at him. Neither needed to say anything else. Months later, the diner remained open, not because one man had magically solved every problem. Linda still worked hard. The community still had to support the business. There were still slow mornings, and unexpected expenses. But the building was secure. And Linda no longer ended every night, wondering whether the next month would be the last. Sometimes, new customers heard pieces of the story, and asked Linda why Henry had done something so generous. Linda always gave the same answer. "I gave him breakfast." People usually laughed. Linda didn't, because she had finally understood something. Years earlier, she thought she was giving a lonely man toast and coffee. Henry thought she was giving him a reason to leave the house. Linda thought she was remembering a customer's order. Henry thought someone remembered him. And neither of them realized at the time how far a small act of kindness might travel before finding its way home. Sometimes, the kindness we barely remember giving becomes the kindness someone else remembers forever. If this story touched you, comment "Kindness lives here." And if someone once showed up for you during a difficult season of your life, share that memory in the comments. You never know who might need to read it today.